Let's get this sports podcast party started, all right?
The J Reels Podcast.
What is happening, my good people? Greetings. How are you? How's it going? How's everybody doing out there? What is the latest and greatest? Hope everybody's doing well, feeling fantastic, in excellent spirits. Revved up for a big week of podcasts, as this is the first of 3 coming your way. Doing what I love best and bringing you up to speed on all that's happening in the world of sports, as this is the J Reels Podcast with your host, J Reels. For my first timers, welcome aboard. And for those who've been banging with me going back to the very beginning, somewhere in the middle or even as early as this past Thursday, I welcome you guys and gals back. And just a couple of housekeeping notes before we begin. For starters, I mentioned that third podcast, and that's going to come along Friday with a very special guest, and that is none other than WFAN's sports talk radio host, Keith McPherson. He's going to share his story with me so I can bless it to you guys and gals, and it's a very compelling one at that. Going up the ranks, going through the rigors of what it takes to not only brand yourself in a very oversaturated market, but of course we all know you're going to find your audience, you're going to find your tribe in doing so, and he certainly has done that. Big time Yankee fan. A lot of the discussion in which we spent over an hour is him and what he's had to go through to get to where he's at right now. So we do talk sports on the latter half, or the latter quarter, I should say, of our conversation, but you would be remiss not to tap in to listen to what he has to say about his journey and what it took to get to where he's at. Fascinating to say the least, and that will be Friday coming your way, not only audio but also video as well, so you definitely have to tune into my YouTube channel at JReels, also on Spotify, where I've now been able to post video, so you definitely want to keep your eyes peeled for that at the end of the week. And then of course, I have to bring up OLIPOP. For those who aren't familiar with OLIPOP, well, now this is your chance. I understand you're probably used to drinking a certain type of soda pretty much since you were a boy or girl, but now that's going to change because you're going to have to try OLIPOP, OLIPOP, because it is not only healthier for your gut, has prebiotics, has ingredients that you could recognize, read, no high fructose corn syrup, non-GMO, it's vegan, it's paleo, it's better for you, and they have very interesting flavors on top of that. Not only do they have the classics such as vintage cola, ginger ale, cream soda, you name it, lemon lime, but they also have summer flavors such as watermelon lime, tropical punch, which is my favorite, even banana cream. What, banana cream? And also a crisp apple. So they have flavors that pretty much run the gamut. And to beat the heat, as we're in the dog days of August, and to quench your thirst, go to drinkolipop.com. And upon checkout, use the promo code JReels to get 15% off, that's 15, off your order. Please do so. I get a kickback of that. So if you go ahead, order a case, order a couple, half dozen, why not? Order a dozen of them, please. How about your boy? Once again, go to drinkolipop.com, save 15% by using the promo code JReels at checkout. And please, I would certainly implore you to do so. And thank you so much for your support. All right, now let's get right to it as we get through this somewhat of a vast wasteland in sports. We understand it's going to be predominantly baseball. I know the Olympics is taking up a lot, which is good for the Olympics, but yours truly, I still haven't been able to latch on as we are now into the final week. A week from today, you'll have the closing ceremonies, which will take place really yesterday, but on the podcast a week from today, we'll wrap up everything that has to do with the Olympics and move on from there. But for right now, I want to start off with baseball. And it's interesting because before I even get into pennant races and keep you up to date on what's happening there, sadly, there's a story in baseball which is superseding all that. And even though they've been an awful team this year, and it's weird because this team has actually had some success here over the last few years, more so with Tony La Russa when he was the manager. They made it to the playoffs a couple of times, even as early as 2021 when they lost to the Astros in the division series. Or was it the wild card? No, I think it was the division series when they did lose to Houston. But for the Chicago White Sox, here's a team that we understand has a long history in the sport, won a World Series back in 2005, and not to go through the entire history of this organization, but like I said, they have had recent success, and they've had and still do have a couple of good players on their team, whether it's Luis Robert, the center fielder. We know Garrett Crochet, a guy that was heavy as far as trade rumors go, but still a member of the White Sox. And even with the manager, Pedro Grifol, I know he's a young guy, more or less a person that's going to work with the front office, part of the analytics, the day and age of what baseball has become here over the last, I would say, maybe half dozen years. Certainly here in 2024, it's all about the collaboration between the manager and the front office as far as how to map out a game, a series, etc. So it's not all his fault, and even though he probably will get the axe once the season concludes, but when we look at the White Sox as of right this moment, we know they have the worst record in baseball by far. This is a team that is, count them, and it's almost unfathomable to even say. They are 60 games, 6-0 under 500. 27-87 is their record. They have currently lost 20 in a row, and I believe earlier this year, they probably lost, I think, what was it, a 16-game losing streak? So here they are, now 114 games into the season, 48 left, and they are by far going to be a team that's going to end up in futility when it comes to overall in Major League Baseball, and I'll get to that in a second, but they are just one game away, and they're going to play the Oakland A's, so it's not as if they're going to play a world-beating team in the least. We know the A's, also one of the worst teams in the sport, the second worst record in the American League, but can the White Sox avert a date with the record books? If you recall, 1988, to start the year, the Baltimore Orioles lost 21 straight games, and even then, they didn't match what the 62 Mets did, and it's going to be a tie-in just in a matter of minutes, so just hang with me for a second, please. So with them, if they lose tonight in Oakland, they will tie that record, and then they'll be 2 losses away from the 61 Phillies, who have lost 23 straight, which is the all-time record in Major League Baseball. And to think, even the 62 Mets didn't have a losing streak as long as the one that the White Sox are flirting with the Orioles and the aforementioned Phillies. And let's say that they do tie the record. I would think they probably will when it's all said and done, but I wouldn't be shocked if for whatever the reason they go out there tonight and they beat the A's knowing that they do not want to be a part of this history. And then who knows, maybe they'll start another losing streak after that. But with the way this team has gone, you would think that 21, which is they'll be staring at come tonight around 10:07 out in the West Coast or here local time. But I could see the White Sox tying that record. Will they eclipse it? Now that we'll have to wait and see. Again, the A's, it's not as if they're going to be in the midst or gunning for a wild card spot in the AL. They've punted their season out to sea, and we all know what's going to happen with the A's here over the next few years before they move to Vegas. But with the White Sox hoping to avoid another loss to tie the Orioles, and I'm going to say right now, I think they'll tie it, but I don't think they'll beat it. Because I know that this record's going to be hovering over them, and who knows, the A's, I'm sure they're going to do whatever it takes to continue that losing streak for the White Sox. They don't want to be a part of history. They don't want to be the team that finally lost to a team that had lost 20 straight games. So I can see Oakland doing their best job to try to play spoiler, to add more misery to the White Sox organization, their fan base, etc. And who knows if they're going to get to 23. I would think that if the A's sweep, they'll tie the Philly record, as we all know. That was, 60 some odd years ago? But as I pull up the White Sox after these 3 games against the Oakland A's, I want to see who they play after that. I would think they're going to go home because they're in the midst of a road trip where they lost the 3 games in Minnesota to start this trip after losing 3 to Kansas City at home. And then after that, I would think their next matchup could be, as I pull that up here, they actually have a date, 2-game series at home against the Chicago Cubs. So if they're going to do this and snap this streak, they might as well do it in Oakland, because even though they'll go home, but you think the Cubs, their team and their fan base is going to want to lose to a White Sox team that is heading to immortality when it comes to losing in a regular season? I don't think so. So let's see what's going to happen. Then they have the Yankees coming in afterwards, so who knows? And the schedule gets a little bit tricky. They go to Houston after that. But that's well down the road. The next 3 games in Oakland, follow that up by the Cubs this weekend. Only a 2-game series Friday and Saturday. So they'll have Sunday off before having the Yankees come into their building. And as we talk about the 62 Mets, I don't think the White Sox are going to come anywhere close to 40 and 120. Maybe they end up 42 and 120, which will equal the Met number as far as losses in the regular season. And for whatever the reason, I guess there were 2 games on the schedule in 1962 that the Mets didn't make up, considering they were just god-awful. So their record was 40 and 120, not 40 and 122 or anything like that. But it is possible that they could flirt with 120 losses. That's still, think about it, they have 87 now. And they would still have to lose 33 the remainder of the way in order to match that 120 loss ledger. And can they do it? Of course they can, based on how they're playing. But we've seen this over the years, whether it was, I believe, the 03 Tigers. Maybe it was 06. No, 06, obviously, they went to World Series. I think it was in 03 where they were this close to matching the Met record, but I believe they lost 119 that year. They were 43 and 119. And there have been a couple other teams that have flirted with that, even the A's, I think, as of recent vintage. But here it is. For the White Sox to have to deal with this threshold, not to get to 21 straight losses, and maybe upon losing tonight, they're going to be staring at 23 straight, although you got to lose 22 before you get to 23, understood. And then after that, and let's say if they do get to 23 and maybe surpass that with the Cubs this coming weekend, then with the Yankees after that in Houston, who knows? I don't think it's going to go any deeper than 23. I could see them tying it tonight, but I think they'll win one of the next 2 games in Oakland. And then who knows? Maybe they'll start another losing streak considering what their schedule is going to look like here over the course of the next week to 10 days. So again, I don't think they're going to match the 62 Mets. They're in a league unto themselves. And for the White Sox, they're certainly headed in that direction considering this losing streak that's now approaching, well, you still got to get to 24, 2 dozen, but they're certainly at 20, and let's see if that's going to continue as we move it along. So I wanted to start there. I know it's a weird way to start, but considering that they're facing a record for Major League Baseball, one that we haven't seen in 36 years, and they have a chance to tie that tonight and even eclipse it tomorrow, and maybe with the Philly record, staring at that, who knows where this White Sox losing streak will end. So now as I get to what's happening in baseball, and not many developments that have taken place. I know you've had some more history made in a sense when it comes to another no-hitter. Now, mind you, we had one no-hitter up until July 25th, and that was Ronel Blanco's. We've discussed April Fool's Day for the Houston Astros. And then on July 25th, you had Dylan Cease throw a no-hitter against the Washington Nationals. And then 8 days later, the former San Diego Padre, now San Francisco Giant, Blake Snell, threw a no-hitter Friday night against the Cincinnati Reds. And think about this, and I've always teased Blake Snell, him being a Scott Kazmir 2.0. For those who don't know who Scott Kazmir is, he was the number 1 pick of the Mets, left-handed pitcher, was a similar pitcher to Blake Snell where he struck out a lot of batters. I believe led the league in strikeouts one year when he was a member of the Tampa Bay Rays. But he always walked a lot of guys, was a high-volume pitcher, 5 innings at best. Maybe he'll get to a 6th inning. Guy that had a lot of talent, but certainly was unable to find the strike zone at times. But I have to give it up. Snell is a lot better than Kazmir, considering that he's won 2 Cy Youngs, now has thrown a no-hitter on his resume. And think about this. This outing Friday night was the first time he pitched into the 9th inning. Now, that's a combination of he being, in all fairness, him being a 6th-inning pitcher tops. Because, like I said, he does walk a lot of batters. He's the type of guy that gets into deep counts. And therefore, if you're going to do that, you will not see the 7th inning and beyond, or rarely for that matter. And for Snell to get into the 9th inning, not only for the first time in his career, but he pitched a complete game and in the process threw a no-hitter. I mean, what more can you say? And like I said, because of the volume that he throws, and not only that, but of course with the analytics and the world that we live in, as I mentioned, he's a guy that's not going to pitch deep into games. And when you have that just strange combo of high pitch counts, not going deep into games, and with the analytics, it certainly doesn't warrant him to have an opportunity to where he's going to pitch in the 7th, 8th, or even 9th inning. Let's say even if he had given up a hit and given up a couple of runs, chances are he would have been long gone from that game. But here it was. First opportunity, seals the deal, no-hitter, 3rd one this year. Blake Snell, what more can you say? And he's actually pitched well here over the last month or so and was part of trade rumors leading up to the deadline there. What was it? last Tuesday. So kudos to him and the Giants, who are trying to hang in the wild card race, and we'll get to that in a minute. Then you have a scenario where Mike Trout, done for the year, meniscus tear that has been revealed, and you have to wonder about the career of Mike Trout. Now, we know he's going to be a Hall of Famer when it's all said and done. I get it. He may not reach the 500 home run plateau or maybe get to 3,000 hits, which are automatics when it comes to baseball. But we got to understand it is 2024, maybe 2,500 or even 2,000 I might throw out there. That could be the new 3,000, or maybe 450 home runs is the new 500. Who knows? But we know how dominant Mike Trout has been throughout the course of his career. 3 MVPs. I understand 1 playoff appearance. Can you fault him entirely on that? No, because obviously you need to have pitching. You need to have a lengthier lineup. And although they've had some good lineups over the years, but certainly far from the starting pitching that we've seen. So for Trout, what is he, 32, about to be 33 years of age. He's had these injuries over the years, calves, now knees, among others. And who knows if you're going to see the dominant. And we did see that at the beginning of the year, but then now, for whatever the reason, Father Time is starting to bite him in the ass to the point where he's going to lose out on another season, not play a full season. And what does this mean for him throughout the rest of his career? He has that contract. There's no way you're going to be able to trade him unless it's going to be a team where maybe Philadelphia, not too far from where he grew up in South Jersey. If the Phillies are willing to take on that contract, who knows? But chances are he's going to be an Angel for life. And not only that, but you're not going to see a prime and top-notch Mike Trout if the Angels happen to make it into the postseason over the next few years. Unfortunately, you may not get the guy that we would want to see on a big stage perform at that level to see if he could get his team to a World Series and win the whole thing. I think those days are maybe not long in his rearview mirror, but he's certainly looking at it saying, yeah, that guy that in his mid-20s was just tearing the sport and being arguably, if not the best player in all of baseball, those days I think you could arguably say that they're behind him. And then his teammate, I don't know, I got to throw this in there, Ben Joyce threw the fastest pitch. I think it was recorded ever, but I know for this year he threw an 104-mile-an-hour pitch, almost at 105. It was 104.7. The only reason why I bring this up, it happened against my Mets on Saturday, which did a terrible job this weekend, and I'll get to them when we do a lay of the land in baseball. But for a pitcher to throw 104 miles an hour, I mean, really? I remember Joel Zumaya. Remember the reliever there, the Detroit Tigers back in the mid-2000s? He was throwing it at 103. We know about Aroldis Chapman getting it up there at around 103. I believe he even tapped out at 104, or topped out, excuse me, at 104 miles an hour. But here it is. He was almost at 105. And for whatever the reason, his first ever save, because remember, they traded Carlos, what's his name, Escobar to the, or I believe it's Escobar. No, Estevez. I got my names mixed up there. Carlos Estevez. They traded their closer to the Phillies there right at the deadline. So they anointed Joyce as the closer and getting his first save, throwing that pitch, striking out JD Martinez. Martinez even said that's the fastest pitch I've ever seen in my life. So there you have it for Ben Joyce, and just wanted to throw that out there. I know it's trivial, it's frivolous, but only because it ties in there with the Angels. And when we take a look at the land here in baseball, not a lot has changed. I know the Phillies, they finally snapped that long losing streak, and that was 6 games. Remember, they got swept by the Yankees. They lost the first 2 games to Seattle. And even though yesterday they finally came out and had a bit of a rocking chair type game to salvage that series, and even with the Braves and the Mets looking to nip at their heels, and they were just 6 and 7 games out, but with both the Braves losing to the Marlins in the back 2 games of their series, and kudos to the Marlins for splitting that series down in Atlanta. And just like I mentioned, with the Mets winning on the opening night, where Paul Blackburn, their latest acquisition from Oakland, who started that game and pitched effectively, winning 5-1, but then lose the back 2, tough loss there on Saturday night to where they took a 4-2 lead on the heels of a grand slam by JD Martinez before Zach Neto got the 3-run homer to make it 5-4. And for what that was worth, the Mets were unable to try to come back to win that game. And then yesterday, losing 3-2. I know Francisco Lindor looked like he hit a home run, but it went foul, which would have tied the game there in the 7th. But the Mets were unable to scratch another run to tie. So not a good job there to start off a 10-game road trip, which now brings them to St. Louis, which is a big game right now when it comes to the wild card standings. They're there for a makeup game before going to Colorado for 3 and then Seattle to wrap up this trip. So you would think, Colorado, hey, can they at least get 2 out of 3 there, considering they couldn't get 2 out of 3 in Anaheim? We'll see how that fares for the Mets. But for Philly, as they hit a malaise here in the season, and for pretty much leading up to that past week where they lost 6 in a row, they were the best team in the sport by record standings. And now that they have a little bit to exhale, now they go to LA for a big series with the Dodgers, and that's going to be interesting, and I'll talk about that where we'll look at the series for the early part of the week in just a moment. But overall, not much has changed. AL East is still the same, 67 and 46, deadlock between the Orioles and Yanks. Then you have the Guardians, who have a 4 in the loss, 4.5 over the Twins. That's the one thing. At least you have some decent division races where it looked like a month ago you weren't going to have that. And we know about the AL West, where Seattle just has the slightest edge. Now they're dead even in the loss column at 54, but they have 2 games ahead, where the Astros have 2 games in hand. 57 and 54 for Houston. Texas trying to hang in there in the division, considering they're only 5 in the loss, but 5.5 back in the AL West. Then we just talked about the East, where the Phillies have a 6-game and 8-game lead over the Braves and Mets. Brewers trying to get some distance between them and the St. Louis Cardinals. 6 in the loss, but 5.5 back. Dodgers, who are trying to turn their season around, and the Dodgers, we talked about them on Thursday's podcast, had a better weekend this weekend, and Freddie Freeman looks he'll be back in the lineup, having to deal with health issues with his son, and everything seems to be okay there, and I think he'll be in the lineup tonight against the Phillies. And let me just double check that. Now, they did win 2 out of 3 in Oakland after losing badly there on Friday night. So you have to give it up for them to bounce back and respond the way they did, knowing that they have the Phillies coming to town. And that's going to be a pretty much, maybe arguably, an NLCS preview. So the Padres, who have cooled off a little bit. No, not necessarily. I was looking at the Diamondbacks. My apologies. The Padres won 2 out of 3 against Colorado. No shock there. But for them and then the Diamondbacks, who are now in the division where 5 in a loss for San Diego, 5 in a loss as well for Arizona. But the Diamondbacks have a game in hand in San Diego. San Diego 61 and 52, Arizona 60 and 52. So they're still within striking distance of the division. And the Dodgers, let's see how they fare against the Phillies here in the early part of the week. Let's see if the Phillies have gotten out, and with snapping that losing streak, maybe they could get themselves back in winning ways, maybe win a series. We'll see. So the division races, a lot better than what we would have thought a month or so ago. And then the wild card, as we all know, is going to be topsy-turvy there in the National League. But in the AL, Yanks are in good stead. But remember, if the Yankees overtake the Orioles, they're currently tied, but I guess the Orioles have the advantage as of right this moment because of the season series advantage. But Yankees have a 3.5 game lead over the Twins, where the Twins have a half-game lead, 2 in the loss over the Royals. Then you have the Red Sox, who are a game in the loss behind Kansas City, but 2.5 back, because the Red Sox actually have 3 games in hand on the Royals. So that bodes well for them, because if they win those 3 games, they'll actually have the final wildcard spot in the AL. Then you have a precipitous drop-off, because the Rays, although they played well in Houston this weekend, where they did win 2 out of 3, but they are currently tied with the Astros, 5 games back of the final wildcard spot. And then after that, it just drops off precipitously with Texas, Detroit, and I'm not even going to go there after that. So that's what you have in the AL. The NL, we know that the Braves, Padres, they are currently tied for the 4th seed, although the Braves have the leg up because of the games in hand that they have over San Diego. They actually have 2 games in hand. Braves are at 60 and 51. The Padres, aforementioned, 61 and 52. Then the Diamondbacks at 60 and 52 have the 6th seed and the final spot in the NL wild card. And then now it separates a little bit, because with the Mets losing those 2 games in Anaheim, they are now 1 in the loss, but a game and a half back of Arizona. Cardinals 2 behind the Mets in the loss column, a game and a half. That's why that game today, it's enormous. Because if the Cardinals win, they'll gain a game on the Mets and maybe in the process lose certainly a half game behind San Diego and Arizona. I'll check the schedule to see if both of those teams are playing tonight. So that is an enormous game for both of those teams, and in particular the Mets, if they don't want to slip further in the wild card race. Then you have the Pirates, who are a half game behind the Cardinals, 3.5 behind the final spot. San Francisco, as I mentioned, even with Blake Snell, they won 2 out of 3 in Cincinnati. Although they are 1 game under 500, but they're 4.5 back. And then from there, Cubs, Reds, they're 6 and 6.5 back, but both of those teams are 4 and 5 games under 500. So am I going to take them seriously? No. I'm just going to look at Giants, Pirates, Cardinals, Mets, Diamondbacks. And to think, those 5 teams, and really you could even throw the Padres and Braves there too, because when you look at it, as I've said last week, those 8 teams are going to be fighting for those 3 spots. And as of right now, if you want to just make it even, to shrink it, with the Diamondbacks down, you have 6 teams that are going to play for that final spot. And because of the Braves, Padres, Diamondbacks, they're separated by a half game, and then you got to lump them all in as far as being threats in this wild card race. So it is going to be crazy. It is going to be just, like I said, battle royale from here on out. And as we look at the schedule here, Arizona's at Cleveland. So that's going to be interesting for the Diamondbacks to go to the Lake Erie or right off of Lake Erie, where the Cleveland, who just had a split against the Orioles over the weekend, and Cleveland won the first 2 games of that series before Baltimore coming back. So good job by the O's. But Arizona goes to Cleveland. So that's going to be a very interesting test for the Diamondbacks. Then you have Houston at Texas. I believe let's see if that's a 4-gamer. Houston at Texas. We know that that's going to be huge if Texas is going to try to eat closer to the top of the AL West, because as I mentioned, the wild card, that's going to be a lost cause. Let's see if that's a 4-gamer. I think that's a 3-gamer because they did play 4 games earlier this season. So let me just pull that up real quick. Yes, that is just a 3-game series. As Texas, they're going to come to New York at the weekend to play the Yankees. So that's a series that we'll keep an eye on. We know about Mets and Cardinals just for the 1 game today. That's at 5:15. Sean Manaea is going to pitch, so let's see how he does there in St. Louis. San Francisco at Washington, only because San Francisco's in the mix. Minnesota at Chicago to play the Cubs. All right. Boston at Kansas City. That's a big series. And if the Red Sox were to sweep the Royals, they will overtake the Royals for that final spot. So that is an enormous series for both of those teams as they try to duke it out there for the wild card spot. We talked about Philly at LA, San Diego at Pittsburgh. That's going to be a huge series starting tomorrow. Cincinnati, I'm going to talk about Cincinnati because to me, they are a foregone conclusion. Baltimore's at Toronto, Milwaukee at Atlanta, interesting series there. Tampa Bay will then go to St. Louis after the Mets and their quick pit stop before going to Colorado. Then you have Chicago and Oakland, as we talked about. And that's pretty much it. Detroit and Seattle, only because of Seattle and where they stand in the AL West. But you have some interesting series. Arizona at Cleveland, San Diego, Pittsburgh, Philly at LA, Houston at Texas, Tampa Bay, St. Louis, Boston, Kansas City. So you got a little juice here in the early part of the week when it comes to baseball. So I'll be on top of it once we get to Thursday's podcast, as we will encapsulate everything at that time to see how these series had shaped down and who's got some separation, who's gotten closer, as we take a big giant look at the MLB landscape later on this week. Besides that, let me see what else I got with baseball. I think that's it. Pretty much covered everything. Oh, should I get into Gleyber Torres? He got benched by Boone the other day. That was actually a shock to me because I watched that live where Torres hit a line shot off the top of the wall and was rounding first as the ball was retrieved by the infield. And then it took a half an inning. He did play the field, but then after the top of the third concluded, Aaron Boone decided to pull him. Gleyber Torres came out and said all the right things. I got to play better, yada, yada, yada. To me, Gleyber Torres Check those receipts. He should have been traded at least a year ago, maybe even 2 years ago because of his regression. They could have got more for him a couple of years ago, and now they're obviously not going to get anything for him. The trade deadline is come and gone. He's a free agent at the end of the year. He's actually hit better over the last couple of weeks and has increased his average to, get ready for this, 235. So for what that's worth, Torres is trying to salvage his year, but certainly by his lackluster play, and he leads the Major League with, 14 errors at second base. So if the Yankees even think to re-sign this guy, they got to be off their rocker. Brian Cashman, you know better. Just let him walk. And if he flourishes elsewhere, and that's the problem with the Yankees, because they think that, he's a young player, a la Gary Sanchez. And I even talked about that years ago where the Yankees should have jettisoned him based on his Mendoza batting average and his lack of production, striking out a lot, and him behind the plate. And where's Gary Sanchez? I'm sure he's probably in the Major League somewhere or maybe on a minor league contract for some team. But Torres, a guy who had MVP potential, especially in his first couple of years as a Yankee, and now he's bottomed out. And I'm sure a lot of the Yankee fans want him long gone, not a winning player. And remember what he said when Jazz Chisholm was acquired about 8-9 days ago, where it was brought to Torres' attention, hey, will you think about going to third base? Like, I'm a second baseman. All right. I'm sure duly noted by the Yankee brass. And one more time, it'd be shame on them if they even think to bring Torres back, even if it is at a hometown discount. So that's what I got to say about that. So let me move on. Let me get to the NFL. You had the Hall of Fame weekend, which I didn't really pay attention to. I know the game was canceled because of the weather there between Chicago and Houston. And then you had the ceremony on Saturday with all of the Hall of Famers there. I know Julius Peppers, even Devin Hester was part of the guys who got the gold jacket. I know I'm missing a ton of others, but I didn't really follow it. I wasn't on top of it. So I saw some clips here and there, but even Steve McMichael, God bless him, I know a lot of his former teammates and Hall of Famers were around him during the time because he has ALS and obviously not in great shape, but certainly is he worthy of being a Hall of Famer? That we could argue, but today's not the day to get into that considering his health status and where he's at. But that was a sight to watch with his wife there and getting the bust and had the long hair at the time when he was a member of the Bears back in the 80s. So he had all that, and with the exhibition season beginning this Thursday, you've had a lot of injuries here over the last week. And I'll go through them. Justin Herbert looks like he's not going to play in the preseason by any measure. Out with plantar fasciitis. Looks like he's going to play in week 1, but there's going to be a lot of rest, a lot of recovery leading up to the opening game there. So you have him you got to concern yourself with if you're a Charger fan, and head coach Jim Harbaugh, and especially the fan base there, the 40 that are of you out there in LA. Then you have Geno Smith, another quarterback who's recovering from knee and hip injuries that he suffered in practice last Tuesday. Should be fine for week 1, but certainly one to keep an eye on here as we get closer to the start of the season. Speaking of LA, the Rams, Puka Nacua has a knee injury that's not day to day, it's week to week. Another situation where he should be ready for week 1. And it's not that serious, but they want to take precaution on their star receiver who had a year for the record book when it comes to rookies in his first year there last year as a member of the Rams. Then you had DeAndre Hopkins, speaking of knee injuries, 4 to 6 weeks with a knee that's not going to need surgery, but chances are he's going to miss the opening week of the NFL season. We all know it starts 5 weeks from yesterday, so even though the timetable 4 to 6, maybe he will be ready for week 1. That we'll have to wait and see. He, a member of the Tennessee Titans. And then you also had the linebacker of the Arizona Cardinals, B.J. Ojolari, done for the season with a torn ACL. So that's a big loss there for an Arizona team that's trying to find their sea legs as an organization. New coach, second-year coach there, Jonathan Gannon. We know about Kyler Murray. Let's see how he rebounds and responds, considering how the Cardinals, who made the postseason a few years ago, now trying to see if they could get any type of traction, relevance there, not only in the NFC West, but throughout the NFL. Then you've had a couple of one retirement in particular. Tarik Cohen, the longtime member of the Chicago Bears, got a tryout there with the Jets and had suffered a knee injury in 2020, was trying to get himself back. got himself into shape, got an offer by the Jets, but realized, it's time for him to move on. So Tarik Cohen doesn't get an opportunity to lace him up and maybe even earn a spot on the team with the Jets with all the expectations that are surrounding them this year, as we all know. Tyreek Hill restructured his contract. Now, over the next 3 years, gets $90 million, $65 guaranteed. But over the course of the contract, including this year, 4 years for $106 million, the most ever by a receiver, which is weird because you've seen Justin Jefferson get 4 for $140. So doesn't that mean he gets 35? But I guess with the restructuring, and remember, when he got traded from Kansas City to Miami, he got 4 for $120. So maybe for whatever the reason, the capologists down in Miami, they restructured it and tweaked it to the point where he now has the most all-time for a receiver. So kudos to him. And let's see, Tristan Wirfs also got a big-time deal, 5 for $140. The offensive lineman there, right tackle for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. So kudos to him, 88 of that guaranteed. So Tristan Wirfs will be a part of that line over the next 5 years. That is pretty much it when it comes to the NFL. I'm not going to get into the hard knocks with the Chicago Bears, speaking of which, with Caleb Williams. And I haven't really tuned into the hard knocks over the years. I know the in-season has to do with the AFC North this year, which, of course, are my beloved Steelers. And that's going to be interesting because the Steelers really don't want to get themselves preoccupied or associate themselves with having cameras into their locker rooms, HBO, things of that nature. You haven't seen that, and now you're going to get a chance to see that, I would think, mid-season on. Maybe I'll tune in there because you get the chance to see what's happening in Baltimore, Cincinnati, Cleveland. How they're going to tie that in is going to be fascinating, so maybe I'll tune in there. But I didn't look at the Giants as far as their offseason hard knocks was concerned, and I don't know if I'm going to be there for the Bears, which starts tomorrow, HBO or HBO Max, wherever you get HBO or how you stream it. So for those who are going to be revved up, ready to go to see Caleb Williams and the head coach there, Eberflus, get his team ready for the upcoming season, have at it. So that's what I have with the NFL as I take off the helmet and shoulder pads. Quickly, let me get to one newsworthy item in the NBA as I lace up the high tops. Gordon Hayward, the longtime Utah Jazz, as we all know, Boston Celtic before suffering that gruesome injury in the very first game against Cleveland. And then him trying to get his career in order, most recently with Charlotte, bounced around there a little bit. But for Gordon Hayward, who had a 14-year career, started off in college when he was a member of Butler. His head coach, of course, Brad Stevens, back-to-back, was, I believe, part of the first team. I don't believe he was part of that second team that made it when they lost to UConn there in the second go-around. Remember, they lost to Duke in the first one. I believe he was the one that actually took the half-court shot, which would have been one of the great shots of all time in any college or pros, as the Bulldogs looked like they were this close from upsetting the Duke Blue Devils, but they were unable to do so. But for Gordon Hayward, longtime NBA career, several all-star teams. It was actually a part of Kobe Bryant's last regular season game, if you recall. The 60-point game that he had, he did chuck 50 shots, as we all know. But Gordon Hayward had a very good career. Was hoping as a Celtic fan with he and Kyrie Irving would have been part of that change with Jaylen Brown, and then, of course, the rookie year for a one Jason Tatum. Looked like they would have had a good core, good nucleus for that time frame, but with Hayward not being the same, although had his moments after that just gruesome ankle injury, but was unable to really get his footing, no pun intended, and therefore the same throughout the rest of his NBA career from that point on. Calls it a career, 14 years in the league, will retire, focus more on family, I believe, wife and 4 girls. So kudos to Gordon Hayward, had to give him his props as he moves on to the next phase of his life. All right, now let me get to it with the Olympics, as I don't even know, do I lace up my sprinting shoes or what have you? Who knows? But the Olympics now into the final full week, and with the closing ceremony there on Sunday, which, to think, already a week and a half almost in the books, just like that. And I hate to go there with this because this is a scenario where it's don't hate the player, hate the event. Because I can't really say hate the game or hate the sport for that matter, but I have to throw some cold water here because what we've seen here over the last 24 hours with 2 of the events, one golf and the other tennis. And we've talked about tennis last week where we saw the matchup between Novak Djokovic against Rafael Nadal, where Djokovic won in straight sets. And of course, that's Nadal's domain, the clay court there at Roland Garros. And then for Djokovic to get to a chance where he could win the gold medal. But let me get to golf first. Obviously, I was touching on tennis there last week, so I gave you a precursor of where I'm going with this. But yesterday, Scottie Scheffler, who, as we all know, has had a big year, more so early on this year, won the Masters there in April, but he shot a 62 yesterday to where he captured a gold medal. And congratulations to him. Give him all the props in the world, and even shows whether it's the major tournaments there for the PGA or even now here when it comes to the Olympics. And then on top of that, you had Djokovic, who beat Carlos Alcaraz, who lost him in Wimbledon, if you recall. But he beat him, I believe, in straight sets. And it was not only very important, but it was gigantically important for Djokovic to win a gold medal. Now, we know how decorated his career is, all-time great. You could argue that he's the best men's tennis player of all time. But 3 years ago when he was in Tokyo, how he was this close from getting a gold and was unable to secure that, and how just crestfallen he was. And it made you think, all right, he's representing Serbia. We know that this was important to him, maybe unlike some of the U.S. players when it comes to tennis. And he finally captured the gold medal yesterday, beating Alcaraz. And even with Alcaraz saying that he felt that he let down the Spanish people, he let down his country, etc., he's a young guy. He'll have an opportunity to win a gold somewhere down the future or somewhere down the road over the next 4 years. I guess he's got to wait some time before he could even get to that point again. But congratulations to Djokovic, tennis. Congratulations to Scottie Scheffler. But why are golf and tennis part of the Olympic landscape? Could somebody clue me in? And I understand over the years this thing has evolved and it's changed. I mean, you had breaking, otherwise known as breakdancing. I'd rather say breaking than breakdancing. That's been a part of the Olympics. Maybe 40 years too late, and we understand that breaking is worldwide. And not to get on that platform to discuss, should it be an Olympic event? I don't think it should. I think that ship had done sailed many years ago, but you have a lot of these events that shouldn't be a part of the Olympics. When you think of the Olympics, you think of the bread and butter, nuts and bolts, track and field, swimming, discus, javelin, pole vault, gymnastics, you name it. But when we look at golf, tennis, some of these sports shouldn't even be there. And people could argue whether or not basketball should be there. Baseball, we all understand it's more of a summer sport than it is basketball. And baseball, remember, even in the 84 games in LA, you had Mark McGwire and a few other major league players, of course, prior to them becoming professionals, that they were part of the baseball team, and then it just fizzled. And now there may be a reintroduction to baseball maybe in 2028 because the Olympics will be back in LA in 4 years. So who knows if you're going to have baseball part of the Olympic consciousness at that time. And to me, I would even look at that as, why? If you had it one time and then it just happened to evaporate, why bring it back? Why? Because it's coming back to U.S. soil? I don't even want it if that's the case. But for golf, tennis, and a few other sports that are out there that have, and again, not a knock on the players, not a knock on the people who are participating, it's the sport and the event itself. It should not be a part of the Olympiad, not part of the Summer Games. To me, we know what sports should be there. And I get it, that it evolves, that over time, maybe sports, just like with the winter sports, with snowboarding and some of the other events that had taken place, especially with the X Games that have now filtered in and been a part of our consciousness to where now they are Olympic sports. All right, fine. Do I look at snowboarding as skiing or figure skating or anything like that, or even ice hockey for that matter? No, I do not. But I get it. But with golf, tennis, what? Summer? No. Shouldn't be a part of it. Case closed. Just my opinion. I don't know what you guys else thinks, but that's just what I got to say when it comes to that. As far as the events, now, I haven't watched, I talked about this last week, how many people are watching the Olympics. I know they're in droves by the numbers. The ratings have been phenomenal. This is the time of the year. I get it, it's summertime, a lot of people are out and about, but then when people are home, especially during prime time, people want to watch what's happening. And baseball, I understand a lot of people aren't really in tune with that. And it's regional, as we know. So the ratings actually have been pretty good when it comes to the Olympics, but I haven't tuned in. And it's just by choice. Sorry, and I don't have anything against the Olympics. Not like, putting up my middle fingers toward them. But when we've seen what's taken place here, whether it's Noah Lyles winning the gold by just the slimmest of margins, 0.005 seconds, congratulations to him. I know Sha'Carri Richardson got the silver, which was tough because a lot of people thought Sha'Carri Richardson, and maybe she did win a gold in another event, but I know the big one that happened there on Saturday, she came in second to St. Lucia's Julian Alfred, and that was actually the first medal ever won by St. Lucia, and it happened to be a gold and beating Sha'Carri Richardson in the process, so congratulations to Alfred for winning the gold there. You've also had Katie Ledecky winning another 800-meter event, and we know how decorated she is when it comes to swimming. Simone Biles, we talked about her last week when it comes to her as a team, winning the gold, but was unable to get a gold. She got a silver for the floor games, but was unable to secure a medal when it comes to the balance beam as she slipped and fell and was fifth. But we know how great Biles is. I mean, listen, even she, as great as and as almost impeccable as her performance have been, event in, event out, year in, year out, sometimes she's not going to pitch a perfect game, or she's not going to throw 100 every time out. All right, she threw 95, but 95 wasn't good enough as she was unable to secure the gold there on the balance beam. But nobody should knock her. Nobody should get on her case and be like, and I get it. There may be a faction to say, hey, she should sweep all these medals. She should be similar to what Michael Phelps did. Or listen, sometimes you're not going to be at your best. You're not going to hit a hole-in-one, or you're not going to throw that perfect game, or whatever it may be. So Simone Biles, you're not going to get any backlash from me. I'll just leave it there. And the U.S. men's team in soccer, they got eliminated by Morocco, for those who care. I know a lot of people may have their eyes set on the World Cup in 2 years, where it's going to be here on U.S. soil, as well as Canada and Mexico. And I guess maybe for the U.S. team, they got some retooling to do, considering that they fired their coach. What was it, about a month ago? So you got that. And where we lead into this week, I'm sorry, people. I don't know what to say, or I don't even know where to even go. I'm sure you still have some track and field events. I know you had a lot of the swimming take place, so I would think that will probably cool off here over the course of these next few days. And again, I'm not on top of the schedule, people. I'm the wrong person to ask. And people say, Jay Reels, come on, it's the Olympics. Every 4 years we have this. And yes, we could look at the time frame that I could take a 30,000-foot view of what's going to possibly transpire over the 16 days in Paris. But again, I have no attachment to this. It's not as if I'm going to be wrapped up in a particular event or in a particular person, or if you're going to have that underdog, let's say in the case, maybe she wasn't a big underdog and won Julian Alfred of St. Lucia, but how many people thought that she was going to come out with the gold considering she was going up against Sha'Carri Richardson? Now that's a story that a lot of people would want to hear, whether it's US or not. But I'm not looking at these events the way it is that I would look at baseball, basketball, football, a major in golf, a major in tennis, the Triple Crown of horse racing, some of the other events that you know that I'm going to have my fingers on the pulse on. The Olympics is once every 4 years. And sadly, once the closing ceremonies happen and we recap it next Monday, whatever big deal, and even basketball, I understand you're going to have the U.S. men's team, you would think they're going to go for the gold and win it when it's all said and done. But once we get to next week and beyond, the Olympics, it just goes away. Nobody's going to remember. Nobody's going to think about what happened unless it's something controversial, unless it's something that was, when you think back, Zola Budd to Mary Decker Slaney, the 84 Olympics in LA, something like that, where you could really say, oh yeah, I remember that. Right now, we're still in the midst of the Olympics, but once it's over, it's going to be a distant memory. Nobody's going to remember. And especially once you get into next year and the year after, people won't even remember that the Olympics were in Paris. Let alone that, oh, what happened in the 100-meter hurdles, or what happened in the 100-meter dash, or whatever it is. Sorry, that's just how it is. I don't know how else to cut it or slice it. And I'm not trying to be mean or not trying to be anti-Olympics by any stretch, but that's just how it is. You watch it for 2 weeks, and then that's it. It's over. It's out. It's gone. On to the next. So that's what happened with the Olympics. And then as I put on my boxing gloves, because I got to wrap up with this, You had a fight on Saturday night for a junior middleweight title, and a fighter that has been very unheralded. And I get it. It's because boxing has fallen flat on its face onto the canvas. Boxing, as we all know, is a far cry from what it once was. And yes, you still may have some names there, the Gervonta Davises of the world, and I'm just throwing his name out there. I can't even tell you whether it's Errol Spence Jr. or even Terrance Crawford for that matter, where Crawford is now 41-0 after winning a close unanimous decision there Saturday against Israel Madrimov, and gave him kudos. He said Madrimov, the guy, fought a great fight. Tooth and nail, was tough. In fact, that was actually the first fight going back almost 8 years. In fact, even over 8 years. July 2016, to where he didn't record a knockout. He went the distance. Now, it was close. You had one of the judges had it at 116-112. The other two judges had it 115-113. So it was certainly close, but he did get all the votes based on what the judges saw. And for Crawford, 41-0, 31 knockouts. And it's a shame because if this guy fought in any other era, he would be a guy that everyone would certainly be on everybody's radar, pay attention to. He's now won his fourth championship in a different weight class. So congratulations to him. But sadly, it almost goes on deaf ears or closed eyes because is anyone really paying attention? Now, if you're a dyed-in-the-wool boxing fan, I'm sure you are, no doubt. But for even a guy like myself who loved boxing going back to the 70s, and I've talked about it ad infinitum and ad nauseum, how boxing in the last, and I'll be generous, 10 years has been a shell of its old self. It's not the same sport anymore. It doesn't have that gravitational pull that, oh, there's a heavyweight fight, I got to get it on pay-per-view. Or let's get all the guys over, order pizza, get a case of beer, and let's watch. Those days are long gone. It's all about MMA and UFC, and rightfully so. They have taken the fight world by storm in that regard. But when it comes to boxing, even with a guy like Terrance Crawford and his record and the knockouts, etc., it's almost as if, hey, what about me? And then the sports fans look back and say, what about you? It's just a shame. And listen, I'm not breaking out the pom-poms for Terrance Crawford. It's not as if I'm a huge fan of his, not as if I've watched a ton of his fights. But when you're looking at a guy that is this good with a perfect record and had a string of knockouts for about 8 years. Now, granted, you can look at the guys who he's fought over those years, and I believe one of them was Errol Spence Jr., which we talked about at the time he fought him. But for Crawford, congratulations. Who's next on his radar, who he has upcoming, I couldn't even tell you. I mean, that's just goes to show you the state of boxing. 2024, that it's certainly a far cry from what it once was, and I don't think that genie is long out of the bottle to where it's going to go back to the way it once was with the buzz, pay-per-view, the excitement. I don't think you're going to see that anymore, people. So that's all I got. Another podcast just about in the books. As always, thank you so much for stopping by, carving out precious time out of your day to listen to what it is that I have to say about what goes on in the world of sports. If you haven't done so, subscribe, rate, review on all platforms, Apple, Spotify, as well as video on Spotify. Keep that in mind, people. Also, the J-Reels podcast, you can find that on my website, jreels.com, my YouTube channel, where you also see the video at J-Reels. I know I haven't put up a lot of content in the last few days. Sports world, again, it's been a little bit of a barren wasteland, but you know it's going to pick up here as we get deeper into the month, and certainly when we get to the end of the month where football will really be close to front and center, even in the midst of the pennant races in baseball. But please follow your boy on all the platforms, as well as go to drinkolipop.com. Save 15%, 15 off your order by going to use the promo code JReels at checkout. Grab a case, grab a couple, grab a dozen to beat the heat here as we're into the dog days of August and quench that thirst. Drinkolipop.com with a bunch of fantastic flavors. And if you want to hit me up with a question, comment, suggestion, you can do so at the following: Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, the J-Reels Podcast, Twitter, X, J-Reels1, just a number, the old-fashioned way, the J-Reels Podcast at gmail.com. I'll be more than happy to follow up with you guys and gals, because whether you do or do not know, this is what I love to do, people. It's in the blood, it's in the DNA, as I always like to say, talking sports since birth. And as you know, independent content creator that I am, yours truly, I need all the support that I could get. 3 subscribers away from 400 on YouTube, and just trying to get my name out there. Please, people, do your part. I would sincerely and gratefully appreciate it, because you know I come with the fire, passion, fury, and energy with my thoughts, opinions, critiques, praise, analysis, feelings on anything and everything that happens on the world of the diamond, ice, gridiron, hardwood, golf course, racetrack, tennis court, boxing ring, octagon, you name it. From my lips to your ears, from my heart to your soul, from where I am to wherever you are, the J Reels podcast always comes correct, direct, and in full effect. And of course, Friday, WFAN's Keith McPherson, my guest, the third podcast of the week. You definitely don't want to miss that discussion that I had with him. From the South Bronx to South Beach to South Central to South Pacific and all points beyond, peace, love, and God bless everybody. And until next time on the J Reels podcast, on the flip, baby.